I have to shout as well because I've got paper, like a cool dude. Hello, my talk is entitled, oh no, that's it. Almost everything that's wrong with the games industry and consumers today can be attributed to a modern obsession with marketing through building communities. In the old days, we used to make stuff and the only engagement we had was people buying the game or not. Some of these jokes are going to fail. Around 10, 12 years ago, there became a pervasive marketing-led need to create communities around games, because that's the easiest way to sell them, because marketing is difficult, and marketing people are lazy, and they're riddled with cocaine. Now we actively encourage people into our world and to be part of what makes the game. We were repeatedly told we are nothing without our audience. Yet we shriek entitlement when those same audiences start to believe they have a stake in what we're selling. Greenlight, early access, Kickstarter, beta programs, endless mailing lists, an Instagram button on your otherwise empty game site, a fucking thunderclap for your early access, for your Kickstarter, for your game. Everything is a desperate call for engagement. We laud developers who interact. We watch slack-jawed as celebrity YouTubers broadcast to millions of eager fans as we desperately hope their fans will become our fans. But you make a deal when what makes you successful is a cult of personality or a cult of brand. And the flip side of that is the people you ask to care about you are going to care about you whether you like it or not. And I don't think we can create narratives around how important building a fan base is and then proclaim that we're all super precious artists, what we think is paramount, and anyone who thinks otherwise is a self-entitled whiny man baby. Hello, I'm James Parker from Ground Shatter. And I'm only telling you that because I'm vain and like the sound of my own voice, not because I want you to engage with my brand. The problem with talking about entitled gamers is that in order to find examples, you end up faced with a phalanx of internet folk who have accidentally conflated consumer feedback with being a cavalcade of abusive, shrieking, homophobic, sexist and transphobic bellends. And I don't particularly want to talk about them, because they exist as a consequence of way more complex social, emotional, and cultural issues that I'm qualified to deal with. So what I want to talk about is a little bit more innocuous, and it's best summed up by these 23,000 people. These people, and let's be generous and say unsuccessfully, petitioned Nintendo to cancel Metroid Prime Federation Force. The whole petition has become social media shorthand for the kind of entitled gamer issue. This is confusing. But to me, to some extent, this is just fans caring about a thing. They care so much about the brand that when they perceive that the brand holder's done something that acts contrary to that, they're willing to do half-assed clicktivism. And that's kind of what we've been asking of them every time we get them to click like, or we get them to sign up to a mailing list or go to a Greenlight page. In 2012, Nintendo decided that rather than give out news and information to the press, they cut everyone else out of the loop, and they went periodically directly to fans through Nintendo Direct. And now the fans are going back, and we learn that engagement works both ways. When people refer to people as entitled, they often mean self-entitled, and that happens a huge amount. But in this case, they have been entitled by the fact that Nintendo have said, hey you guys, what do you think about this? And they've tried to respond, and they have failed. But don't get me wrong, I'm not on these people's sides particularly. I don't care one way or the other about the presence or lack thereof of Samus and Metroid Prime Federation Force. But I'm uncomfortable with the idea that we'll split fandom into good and bad fans, depending on who is and isn't willing to toe the line as far as the brand is concerned. And oddly, this is the first time that games journalists are not complicit in a thing. Games journalists used to act as a kind of proxy between publishers and developers and between the people who played the game. They had letters pages where the flow of information could be firewalled. It could be carefully managed, and they could act as they could deflect opinion, dissenting or not. But the principle isn't wrong. You can build a sustainable and well-run community. I'm not saying you can't do that. And if you can do that, knock your socks off. It's brilliant. Because there are community managers out there who are amazing, who do a brilliant job and make that sort of thing possible. And there are some games that exist solely as a consequence of those communities that people have built up. But we shouldn't buy into the lie that we are perpetually told that this is the best and easiest route to success. And even if it is, there is an inherent cost in doing that. Because good or bad, every time someone knocks a hole in that dam, it gets increasingly difficult for any of us to plug it. And as much as we all want to get the plus sides of having a huge pool of engaged fans right at our fingertips, we can't then admonish ourselves the responsibility of dealing with those fan bases that we create. Creative industries, particularly ours, are increasingly like a 15-year-old who's put their house party as an open event on Facebook and then is somehow flabbergasted when a load of strangers turn up and someone breaks a vase. And just for full disclaimer, this vase was not broken in this party. What happened was this was too narrow and I needed to fill up the slide, and this is a stock photograph, so just be a bit careful when you're referring back to this in your thesis. Why do I care about this? 2 years ago, I got drunk because of Keith Stuart from The Guardian. I wasn't with him. He wasn't in the room. He wasn't probably even in the city. He didn't know I was getting drunk, but I was getting drunk because of him. Back then, I was working for a company, and we did a Kickstarter for our game Salvaged. It was a company that I ran, and I had been persuaded of the inalienable truth that building an audience was the most important thing to do in order for the Kickstarter and for the game to be a success. So we had a Facebook page, we had multiple Twitter accounts. We delved into the inexplicable world of Reddit. We opened up a design forum for high-level backers so they could contribute to the design of the game. And what you have to know about me is, I don't really accept game design input from people that I know and like and who are close friends and colleagues. Getting design input from rich, bored people on the internet filled me with existential horror. But I went along with it because you have to build an audience. That is the accepted thing you have to do. And the reason why Keith Stuart comes into this is that Keith Stuart from The Guardian. I, alongside a load of other game devs, I was asked by Keith Stuart from The Guardian to say what I would do with the Call of Duty franchise. It was a very fluffy, fun piece, and everyone gave facetious examples, and everything was lovely, until I read the comments. And on the comments, there was an absolute tool belt of a man. He didn't really get into the spirit of the piece. A few comedy scattered answers, scattered amongst the semi-serious answers, would have been fun, he said, and he picked apart the ideas one by one. Two of them responded by not least realising frames per second and world size is a technical trade-off. The rest just sat around reminding us why no AAA title company would hire them. He extracted all the fun, he insulted the contributors, he generally behaved like a Guardian commenter. The worst was yet to come, however, because he said this: only James Parker of Opposable Games got it. It turns out the only thing worse than being disagreed with in the comments is being agreed with by a bellend. And through this, I saw a vision of what the future would be. I quit the company that I'd spent 2 years founding. I bought a puppet owl, I did karaoke for 6 hours, and I got absolutely hammered. And it's all because of Keith Stewart from The Guardian. Daniel Kitson. He is arguably the best comedian that this country has produced in the last 30 years, and there's a fair chance you won't have heard of him, and that's fine. But if you don't know who he is, find out who he is and do your best to see him, because he's amazing. Partway through his career, he was on the ascendancy, but he was sat in the stalls in the gents of one of his gigs, and he heard some of his fans talking about them, and they were talking about how much they liked him and how they loved his comedy. But in their other conversations, while Daniel Kitson was in the toilet, he realised that he didn't like them. He didn't want them as fans, and he gave up performing on the comedy circuit. And when I heard that story years ago, and I thought it was vain, and I thought it was arrogant, and I thought it was wrong. And for a long time, I didn't go and see Daniel Kitson, because I thought you cannot put yourself out there and do this thing and build up a following and then reject those people, because you have created that situation yourself. He assumed mainstream success, he carved his own path, he changed the way he worked, he stayed true to his artistic vision, and in doing so, he ensured his own financial freedom so he could stay true to the audience he wanted to cultivate. Keith Stewart from The Guardian was responsible for my Kitson moment. When this champion rocked up, I understood what Kitson had done. He left the mainstream comedy industry, and it was still vain, and it was still arrogant, but it wasn't necessarily wrong. And I'm not comparing myself to Daniel Kitson. It's very much up to you guys to do that yourselves. I'm not a huge talent that he is. I'm not an artist. I make little stupid action games, and I want to make big stupid action games. I don't have a message, and I don't believe what I do is particularly important. But it's mine. I decide those things for myself. I don't want to pick and choose who plays my game. I don't really care. As long as some people are playing it and they're enjoying it, more power to them. But what I do want to do is choose how I interact with them. I don't need or want their endorsement, particularly this guy. And I don't particularly want their input either. And that's why this subject is interesting to me. And that's why I know that engagement with the community isn't necessarily for everyone and shouldn't be the default. And it isn't the panacea for discoverability that everybody wants. It's tricky and multifaceted, and it relies on liking and understanding people, and both of those things are difficult. So I've tried to be sensible. I've tried to not actively build an audience. I lapse occasionally. I have a vestigial corporate Twitter account. I have a broadly unattended Facebook page. I skip green lights. I sell on console platforms, so you don't have to deal with Steam forums. And how's it worked out for me? Has it made me any more successful? Has it made me any happier? Has it given rise to more coherent internal philosophy? Well, no. Of course it hasn't. I haven't built an audience, so my games only sell modestly. And as a consequence, I have to do more work for hire work, which means I'm not necessarily happily doing all the games that I always wanted to do. And actually, the next game I make is probably quite a good candidate for early access, which means I'm going to have to go out there and say, what do you guys think about this? How shall I change it for you? But at least I understand that my relationship with those people is going to be on my terms, and that I can get someone to sit in that position and say, is this a good idea or not? And I don't necessarily have to deal with every single thing every single day. I've gone off. Yeah, I'm going to have to put myself outside the protective bubble of not caring what people think. And that somewhat undermines the initial supposition that we are responsible for the communities we create. So before I go, I want to talk about the parable of Boaty McBoatface. Does anyone not know Boaty McBoatface? Wow. Okay. Very quickly, the Natural Environment Research Council are launching a new Arctic research vessel, and they did an online poll, and the winning entry was Boaty McBoatface. That's largely all you need to know. But this is engagement. This is absolutely engagement. But it's proof that not all engagement is necessarily the engagement you wanted. Some marketing person dearly wanted this to go viral, and it did. But now they've relinquished control over everything about it, and they weren't ready for the consequence that brought. This has done more for public engagement for the work the Natural Environment Research Council does than they could ever have hoped, even if it's people just being silly internet folk. But there's a genuine possibility that it might turn round and not accept the outcome of the poll. And that's a problem, because they opened that door, and now they can't shut it. Asking for someone's opinion and then ignoring it is way worse than not asking them at all. I find it very hard to believe that anyone in this room gave half a shit when the RSS Discovery was launched in 2013. The NERC wanted people to care about what they were doing, and they got what they were wanted. People came in their tens of thousands and proved that they cared. And now there's a good chance that the NERC will launch their next vessel, and it won't be called Boaty McBoatface. If I had my time again, Boaty McBoatface and the False Promise of Democracy would be the title of every single talk I ever do. But when they come out, and when they say it's not called Boaty McBoatface, people are going to be angry, and they will be entitled to be. It's a callback. I'm James Parker, Our Games Writing. Please engage with my brand. Bye.